Hello and welcome to Twisted Britain, a podcast on true crime in Britain with a sprinkling of the weird and macabre. And your hosts are me, Bob Dale.
And me, Ali Downey.
And we are distance recording tonight, Ali Downey. How are you?
We are distance recording. You are all the way up in Scotland and I am all the way down in Bournemouth.
Indeed, this is our second time we've done this.
Yeah.
But we've managed to get this set up, I think, better this time. So hopefully that'll help with the dipping in and out audio that we had the last time we did this. But you've actually prepared two cases. You sent one of them to me, which I have read briefly because we were going to do it as a tiny twisted. But it turns out that it's not tiny. But it's twisted.
No, it's not tiny. It is very twisted, but it's not tiny. And you're going to have a wee revamp of it and we're going to record it when I'm up next week.
Yes. So this will be the second part of this series. So we'll introduce the other one as and when we do it. But what have you got for us this evening, Alistair?
Well, today I'll be mostly talking about the second of the two Crumbles Murders, which took place, both of them, in the 1920s in Eastbourne in the south of England. However, I'll also quickly cover the early crimes of the perpetrator because it gives us context, and also this is certainly a case of a serial criminal who repeatedly reoffends throughout his life, and the progression and the escalation of his crimes is fairly clear to see with the benefit of the sort of 2020 hindsight that we can view his life with now.
And we talk about that quite often, don't we? We talk about how, like, actually looking at it from the future of when it happened, so with the hindsight of looking at it from now, that sometimes it would have been more obvious if with an overview, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
But this is the second of the Crumbles, but not related to the first Crumble.
The only relation to the two murders is that they both happened on the same beach between Eastbourne and Pembersley Bay down in England.
I would imagine a lovely beach. Never been to Eastbourne.
It's a beautiful shingle beach.
Shingles. Is it? Now you'd have to correct my geography here, but is it like kind of Jurassic Coast where they find all the kind of what they call ammonites and all that kind of shit?
Exactly. It's very rocky. It's not the beautiful white sands that we'll see up in Scotland on Moira or on Isla.
Do you know one of the most beautiful beaches I've ever been on? I've definitely showed you the photos. We're on Call.
Oh yes, lovely island.
Yeah, and do you know what? See, if it wasn't for the fact that it was Scottish the temperatures, it could have been the Maldives.
Yeah,
but it's not.
No, it's not, and it's Baltic up there.
But we're hundreds of miles south of that, in Eastbourne.
We are.
The beach called the Crumble then?
It's called the Crumbles Beach. Yeah, that's what it is locally, colloquially known as. But I'd like to say first that this is a truly horrific crime in every sense of the word. And that the disposal of the victim, Emily Kaye's body in this case, is both disturbing and also gruesome, as is often the case in instances of dismemberment. And I'll obviously keep the grim details to a bare minimum wherever I can, and I'll ask that we all remember that this was the life of a fairly young woman cut short in her prime and then treated with a callous lack of empathy that beggars belief sometimes.
It's mad. We've talked, I had the Junan Devani case come out recently, and I feel like, I don't know whether it's because we've gotten more into different types of research and different areas of research, that we've certainly found ones that, I don't want to use the word jovial in any way, but we've certainly found ones that are more oh shit than we've talked about previously.
We have. We've done some real shockers recently.
And is this an oh shit one?
This is an oh shit one. Our perpetrator he'll be on your list.
Oh, good. We've had a couple of bad bastards added to the list recently, but this is will he top the list or?
I don't think he'll top it because we really have covered some horrendous people, but he'll be on it.
Okay. One day I'll actually write that list. You know that but I need to go back through the episodes and write the actual Twisted Britain Bad Bastard list one day. But for another day,
someday, yeah.
Yes, indeed.
One day, someday, you'll post that on the Facebook.
One day, someday. I like that.
Yeah. But today's tale begins, I suppose, with the birth in either 1889 or 1890, we're not sure exactly which, of Patrick Herbert Mahon. He was born in the Edge Hill area of Liverpool to Irish parents, and he was educated in a Catholic school, and he was actually noted as being an intelligent boy and an above-average scholar as a child. While in school...
I was say it's something that I'm just thinking about your teacup poisoner that you've just finished 3 episodes on and will have been out by the time that everybody hears this. Probably one of the smartest people we've ever possibly ever talked about.
He was a very clever man.
And,
maybe not an evil genius, as certain documentaries claim.
Yes, but we'll leave them alone.
An above-average intelligence human being, definitely.
Yeah, we tend to. I suppose we found that a few people, like the ones that aren't passion or circumstance, they tend to have a level of intelligence that is terrifying, actually.
Yeah, the cold, calculated ones. I remember the French killer.
Ah, yes. Not Claude.
No, not Claude. We don't talk about him anymore. Anyway, while in school, Mahon met a girl named Jessie, and after school the couple would marry on the 6th of April 1910, and they would eventually have 2 children. Mahon would have been about 20 years old when he married Jessie, and so far he had led a crime-free life.
Okay.
Shortly after his wedding, however, he was arrested for his first crime, the burglary of the house of a clergyman.
I'm going to ask you this, assuming you probably don't know the answer to it, but are we sure that he had no crime, or was he just not caught for a crime?
No, we're fairly sure that he did commit no crimes before that. He was in a Catholic school until the age of 18, which gives you very little opportunity to commit any crime.
Yeah, fair enough, yeah.
But Mahon wasn't prosecuted for the burglary of that clergyman's house because it was his first offence, and the clergyman in question didn't want to press charges anyway. But this is apparently, I've learned recently, a relatively common behaviour pattern in certain types of criminals. The beginning of multiple concurrent offences often coincides with the start of a long-term committed relationship. I was watching something recently which touched on it briefly, and it's true for quite a broad spectrum of offenders. That sort of altering of the social dynamic acts as a trigger or a catalyst for some repeat offenders, like Mahon.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like, commitment changes him, essentially.
Yeah. And it did, and he would continue reoffending. In 1911, Mahon stole £123 from his employer. And he also abandoned his wife. It's a lot of money. I'll get to how much money it is in a second. He also abandoned his wife at this point to live briefly on the Isle of Man with another woman.
Oh, so he was clearly not a nice guy at this point, then.
No, he really wasn't. And this was also the start of another pattern of behaviour for Mahon. Serial adultery.
Mm.
And it's another pattern of behaviour that he would continue throughout his life. But he only received a caution from police for that crime, which I think is insane when you consider that, taking into account average inflation, that would be just under £20,000 today.
Oh, wow. Good work on working that out. Thank you for that. So, yeah, it's not a small amount of money.
It's a huge amount of money.
It would have bought a house, or it would have. It certainly would have. I mean, it would buy a car now. It would probably have bought a house or something back in the time period.
Almost certainly. Now, the relationship with this other woman ended roughly when the money ran out, and surprisingly, Mahon's wife Jessie forgave him and took him back.
I'm not going to. No victim blaming here, but I'm going to guess silly mistake.
It was a silly mistake, yes, but it was a silly mistake that she would continue making throughout her life.
Okay.
But he moved back in with her and she actually got him a job at the local dairy. But this lasted less than a year, because in 1912, Mahon's sticky fingers this time lifted £60 from his employer.
Which is roughly...
It would be about £9,000 today.
Yeah, just shy of 10 grand, something like that, yeah.
Yeah. But for this crime, he actually was charged.
Because it was a second offence.
It was, it was. And he actually was charged and sentenced and served 1 year in prison.
Okay.
It was his third offence, actually. Burgling of clergy, £123 from employer, and this was his third offence.
Yeah, so year doesn't feel like it's enough, to be honest.
It's not. When he was released in 1913, he and his wife moved to Calne to start over. And it would be here that Jessie gave birth to their 2 children. She wouldn't get the new life she wanted, however, as Mahon had developed a gambling habit, which he fed with more petty crime.
Yeah, okay.
The next major escalation in Mahon's crimes came in 1916. He was burgling a house in the town of Chertsey when he was discovered by a servant girl. Mahon attacked the girl with a hammer, hitting her in the head a total of 9 times before he stopped.
Fuck. That's a rage moment, isn't it?
Yep. It was. Mahon was also brought to trial for this crime before Mr. Justice Darling.
We've heard of Justice Darling before.
We have. We've seen him quite a few times. Thank you, Darling.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Darling. You can't beat a good Blackadder reference, can you?
You really can't. But yeah, anyway, this was an attempted murder, obviously. Medical testimony at the trial revealed that Mahon had likely intended to kill the servant. And had she not had such a, and I quote, generous head of hair, she would very likely have died from her injuries.
A hair helmet.
Yeah. Mahon would appeal for leniency, stating that he intended to join the army. However, the judge, Darling, was not impressed. And he was
You're enjoying that, aren't you?
I am enjoying Judge Darling. He was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment, with Judge Darling stating, as he sentenced him, "I have come to the conclusion that you are not only a burglar, not only a coward, but also a thorough-paced hypocrite."
Ooh. I like thorough-paced hypocrite. That's...
Yeah, it's nice. Good
Judges...
early 20th century language.
I was going to say, judges always, like... I know I slag you for your flowery language at times, Alistair, but, like, judges take it one beyond you, even, at times.
They frequently do. They're very well educated, usually.
Well, that's true, and we aren't, so there we are.
I know. So, a 5-year sentence. Mahon would serve 3 years of this 5-year sentence before being released in April of 1919. When he came out of prison, his wife Jessie was now working as a secretary for an insurance firm in London, and she managed to get her husband a job as a salesman with the same company, and the family moved to the London suburb of Richmond.
Oh, a nice area.
It's a lovely area. For the next few years, Mahon either kept his criminal activities to a minimum or at least managed not to get caught.
Yeah, they're 2 very different things. But
they are. We don't have anything recorded, but, you know, he wasn't charged with anything in that time period. By 1922, Mahon had been promoted to sales manager, and he was on the very respectable wage for the time of around £42 a month.
But are we not talking about, that's thousands of pounds a month, relatively?
It's about, 6 grand, 7 grand at this point.
A month?
Yeah.
Fuck, man.
I know, it's a decent wage.
It's more than a decent wage, yeah.
Now, Mahon's new duties frequently took him into the city of London to visit the offices of other insurance firms that his firm dealt with. And it was on just such a visit in August of 1923 when he met the 37-year-old Emily Belby Kaye. Emily was working as a typist and private secretary for the father, actually, of the author Ian Hay. She was smart, pretty, single, and maybe most importantly to Mahon, had significant savings amounting to about £500-600.
Okay, so I mean, I'm gonna drag you back a minute because I was just thinking now. There's several cases of serial killers and things taking a gap. So I'm just thinking out loud here about when you said that we don't have any recorded crimes for him. So there's a possibility that the new job filled his brain space almost, and so he didn't have that desire to do something. So there's a possibility that he didn't do that.
Very possible.
But this man seems very driven by money.
He's driven by money and adultery.
Two of the lovely things in life, money and adultery.
You can bring most cases down to money or sex.
Well, I mean, I've always said, as you know, to me, it tends to always boil down to money. Most of the cases we talk about are either insurance, there's insurance involved in it, or there's theft of something, or there's lack of money, kind of poverty. So the extremes of cash are a massive driver in a lot of the cases we talk about.
They are. Now, when we look back on it now, it's easy to ask what an intelligent young lady like Emily Kaye could see in Mahon. But he was certainly charismatic, and he had a talent for charming ladies, as well as a talent for lying through his teeth. He introduced himself to Emily with a false name, Derek Patterson. And the pair soon began a heated affair, shall we say.
Passion. They fell in lust.
It was certainly passion on Emily's part. I think actually Emily fell in love with Mahon completely because she was unperturbed when she learned that he'd lied about his name. And she was almost unperturbed that he already had a wife and children.
Oh, but she definitely knew about it.
She 100% knew.
Right, okay. It makes you wonder then why the fake name, why the pretense? If he's happy for her to know the details about his life, why not the name?
The name only lasted, I think, 1 or 2 weeks, according to his account. Anyway, not that we can be 100% sure that his account is accurate, obviously.
Yeah, true.
Now, approximately 3 months after Mahon and Emily began their affair, she discovered, to her joy, that she was pregnant.
Her joy, probably not his.
No, not his joy. In March, however, of the same year, she became ill with influenza. And to recuperate, she travelled to the coastal resort town of Bournemouth, right beside where I am right now.
How far from you? Meters?
Not meters. It's about a 10-minute bus journey. I actually did look into the possibility of recording this in the same hotel that they stayed at.
Oh, that'd be cool, man. Yeah. But then I sprung this recording on you, so here we are.
Well, it wasn't just that. It's turned into a very boisterous young sports bar now.
It's not the place for us, Al.
It's not the place for us.
Take some photos, though, so we can post them.
I absolutely will. Yeah, I will take some photos of the building so that people can have a good look on the Facebook. Now, she was there to recuperate, obviously, but Mahon soon joined her. And when he joined her, he presented her with a diamond and sapphire cluster engagement ring, which he'd bought earlier from a jeweller's in Southampton.
Okay, so he's going big biscuits on this then.
He is going big biscuits. And that night, the same night he gave her the ring, the pair shared a room at the Southwestern Hotel, which is where the sports bar is now. And Mahon signed the register as Mr. and Mrs. P.H. Mahon.
Okay, so he's committed.
He's committed to something.
Right, okay.
Emily, on the other hand, was committed. The engagement ring convinced Emily that Mahon was serious about marrying her. And she told her friends and family that soon she would have a wedding date and that she and Mahon were planning to emigrate to South Africa after they tied the knot. She left out some details, such as the fact that their marriage would be bigamous, or the fact that in February of 1924, she withdrew £404 from her savings, which was either given directly to Mahon or was spent on her future plans with him.
I'm doing the rough maths based on what you've told us about inflation. So, 80, 90 grand?
Yeah, about that, yeah. Probably between 80 and 90 grand.
It's a lot of money.
A lot of money. As the months slipped by, Mahon began to worry that his wife would again discover his infidelity. He probably worried even more so than before, since Emily was, as I mentioned, pregnant with his child.
Yeah.
Now, he convinced Emily to stay with him for a number of weeks in a holiday bungalow that he had rented with the money that she'd given him. Mahon would himself later claim that this was supposed to be a love experiment, a sort of trial run living together before he left his wife, Jessie.
Okay, so is he telling her that or himself?
He's telling authorities that. He's telling authorities that it was her idea and that it was meant to be a love experiment living together before he left his wife.
I don't like the words love experiment. It really...
His words.
It makes me feel a bit icky, if I'm being honest.
It is. And I think it's bollocks. In reality, this was a way to get Emily to a secluded and a quiet place where nobody was likely to see or hear him while he carried out the grim task that he was planning. The bungalow they rented was known as Officer's House, and it was located in a spot well out of the way alongside the shingle beach known as the Crumbles, between Eastbourne and Pevensey Bay. And Mahon had rented it under the false name of Mr. Waller.
Okay, so we already know that he's quite happy to lie about who he is, but so that's not a surprise that he's just going to book it under some fucking...
No, he's a
pseudonym.
serial prevaricator.
Yeah.
My favourite term for liar there.
I didn't want to dive into it. I've already talked about your flowery language tonight, Alistair. So what was it again? Go on, give us it again.
Prevaricator.
Prevaricator.
Yeah.
Had to. Okay, I like it.
It's a good word.
Yeah.
Now, Emily Kaye is known to have travelled to Eastbourne on the 7th of April. She stayed for 5 days at the Kenilworth Court Hotel before travelling on to Officer's House on the 12th of April. Having informed his wife that he was to travel on business, I've just made quotation marks with my hands for our listeners, for several days, Mahon also travelled to the bungalow on the weekend of the 12th to the 13th of April. He told Emily, via telegram, to meet him at Eastbourne railway station. Before travelling to Eastbourne, Mahon is known to have purchased a 10-inch chef's knife and a hacksaw from an ironmonger's located close to London Victoria Station.
Grim tools.
Very grim tools. Now, Mahon would later claim that on the 15th of April, while at Officer's House, he and Emily got into an argument over his reluctance to leave his wife, Jessie. He stated that Emily became angry and threw an axe at him before assaulting him. During the ensuing scuffle, he claimed that Emily fell over a deck chair and hit her head on the corner of a coal scuttle. According to Mahon, upon failing to revive her, he only realised towards daybreak the next day what a fool he had been not to attempt to seek medical assistance.
Oops.
Yeah. Now, this is, I think, fairly obviously a huge pack of lies.
I was going to say, we already know he's a liar.
Yeah.
You reckon that she was properly in love with this man?
I reckon she was properly in love with him.
So, and we've not seen anything from her before to give reason for a violent outburst.
No. And most of the details of this story will be disproved by forensic evidence later on.
Okay. I shall allow you to carry on, but I'm going to go with, I'm calling horse shit on this moment.
You're not wrong. What we do know is that on the 15th of April, Mahon murdered Emily in Officer's House. He covered her corpse with a fur coat, and then he went to bed for the night. The next day, with Emily's body still lying in Officer's house, Mahon sent a telegram to another woman, Ethel Duncan, inviting her down to the bungalow to spend the Easter weekend with him. He instructed her to meet him at the train station on the 18th of April.
Well, I
2
suppose,
days
like,
later.
there's an extra residency available now. Somebody else isn't using it anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sad at myself for saying that. Carry on.
She's only just cold.
It's probably not even fucking cold, man.
Now, over the 2 days before Ethel Duncan arrives, Mahon starts dismembering Emily Kaye's body. Using the large knife and the hacksaw that he'd purchased before going to Eastbourne, he first severed her head and legs and stuffed the body and the bits into a large travelling trunk for the time being.
Another
2
trunk
days
murder, Alistair.
is another trunk murder, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's no train, so you can't push your button.
I was going to say I don't have the button here, but otherwise, yeah, okay.
But later on, there is an opportunity for you to push the button. How annoyed are you going to be?
I'm going to have to put that in post now, aren't I?
Yeah, you will. Now, Mahon met Ethel Duncan at the train station on the 18th, although he was actually very late, and she noticed that his wrist was bandaged. He claimed that this was the result of saving an old lady from falling off a bus.
I mean, he is a hero after all. We know that about him.
Yeah, what a legend. Mahon and Ethel Duncan spent 3 days at Officer's house, with Mahon spending extravagantly, insisting that the two dine nightly at lavish restaurants, and on one occasion even visiting the London Palladium. All the time,
nice.
Yeah, lovely, but all the time Emily Kaye's body is in the trunk in Officer's house.
Fucking hell.
The two parted company on Easter Monday, and Mahon returns to Officer's house where he continued to dismember and dispose of Emily's body. Over the following week, Emily Kaye's body was extensively dismembered. Her head, feet, and legs were incinerated in the fireplace of the bungalow. And on the 22nd of April, Mahon later pulverized these bits into tremendously small fragments. Those are the words of the forensic examiner.
Fucking hell, man.
Which he claims to have discarded over the garden wall of Officer's house. But no sections of Emily Kaye's skull were ever actually recovered. A section of her jawbone and several of her teeth were found in a refuse heap.
Not anywhere near the cottage.
Nowhere near the cottage. Also, the majority of her uterus and her unborn child were never found.
Oh, man.
Mahon returns to the bungalow on the 26th of April. Because I should point out, he's also popping up to see his wife every now and again.
Of course, because he's not an idiot.
Yeah.
Clarify the time frame we're talking about. How long was he in Officer's house for? So he went down for he went down for a couple of weeks. Is that right?
Yeah, he went down. He rented the cottage for I think 3 weeks.
And in that 3-week period, he's met his second wife to be, ended her life, and then invited another woman down, and then gone back to the task at hand, shall we say?
Exactly.
Of disposing of the body.
Of dismembering and disposing of the body. But he won't finish.
Was Ethel in Officer's cottage, Officer's house?
Officer's house. Yes.
Whilst the body was in the trunk.
Yes.
But without, I don't suppose it would have been decomposing by that. But like, she would have been aware?
No,
Yeah, okay.
She had no idea.
Yeah.
Apart from the bandage on his arm when he met her at the train station, she had no idea.
Sorry, I was listening to you. It's just like that's a lot to process in a short period of time.
No, I absolutely know. And he's popping back occasionally to visit his wife so that she's not suspicious. So Mahon returns to the bungalow on the 26th after visiting his wife to continue dismembering the body. He severs the arms and the torso into small pieces before hacking the torso itself into sections. Some of the sections of her body were boiled on this day. These portions were bags which Mahon threw out of the window of a railway carriage while he was returning home to his wife in Richmond.
So he took them on a train with him?
Yes.
This dude's like broken, isn't he?
Yes. Now, Mahon was quite prescient in one respect. His concern that his wife, Jessie, might grow suspicious. She indeed had grown suspicious.
I'm not surprised. He's just spent 3 weeks away with another woman.
Yeah. And on the 30th of April, she personally hired a detective inspector to investigate Mahon.
Okay.
That officer was Detective Inspector John Beard.
Great name.
There's a couple of good names coming up, Bob. Now, while searching the pockets of one of Mahon's suits, Jessie finds a left luggage ticket dated the 28th of April for a bag which had been left at Waterloo Station. Insert soundbite here.
Do you want me to put it in here?
Yeah, sure.
I'll put it in post, it's fine.
She showed the ticket to Detective Inspector Beard, and together they both went to the station to investigate the bag.
Okay.
They presented the ticket to the station staff. They opened the locked Gladstone bag with the help of station staff, and they were alarmed to find that it contained large blood-stained knife, some blood-soaked cloth, and blood-soaked clothing.
So I was literally about to stop you and say, did they wish they hadn't opened it because they're just about to find the bits of her body? But they didn't find the bits of the body. They found the tools.
The knife, the knife that he'd used to begin the dismemberment, and they found the clothes that she was wearing, and the cloth that he'd used to wrap some of the body bits in.
Horrible still.
Still horrible, I know.
I bet they absolutely regretted finding that bag.
Yes, they would have done. It was shocking. But John Beard very cleverly persuaded Jessie to return the ticket to her husband's suit. He then contacted Scotland Yard to report the discovery.
John Beard's smart.
He is good. Scotland Yard sent Inspector Percy Savage.
We've got John Beard and Percy Savage. That's a fucking...
Yeah, we do.
I'd listen to that podcast, I tell you. Savage and Beard presents.
Oh, it sounds like a Channel 5 crime drama.
It's better
Savage
than that,
and Beard. Now, Percy Savage extracted a small sample of cloth from the bag to undergo forensic testing. The analysis of this small sample revealed the stains to be human blood.
Okay.
So he posted 2 undercover policemen to the station with instructions to arrest Mahon when he arrived to collect the bag.
Oh, so just don't go for him now, but we have to wait to prove that he's going to come to get the bag.
Exactly.
Great policing. I'm enjoying this.
Very good policing. There's also some excellent forensic work later in this. At 6:15 p.m. on the 2nd of May, Mahon returned for the bag, and he was immediately arrested by the 2 officers. He was taken first to Kennington Police Station, where Inspector Savage collected him and escorted him to Scotland Yard, where the bag could be opened and properly inspected, because they had just literally resealed it and chucked it back in baggage claim.
So I've got to wonder, I was about to make a note of this to ask you it later, but I'm just going to ask you just now. If he hadn't have gone back, would there have been a record of it being him? I presume there was a process to purchasing the left luggage locker as such.
There definitely would now.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering if he would have just been given a key. Who are you? Pay your money.
I don't know if there would then.
It's just an interesting thought, the returning to the crime, and we're going back to that, proof of other people doing things, and we'll never get into the mindset or brain space of these people because mainly I don't want to. But could he have walked away at that moment and never been found? Technically,
I don't think he would never have been found because, in his case, his wife had found the ticket.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. So she knew and Beard knew.
Yeah. But if his wife hadn't found that ticket, and he'd been able to fully dispose of Emily Kaye's body, it's quite possible he would have gotten away with murder.
Yeah. That's literally, I was just thinking that, like, if he'd burned that ticket on his way out of the train station, just set fire to it, it's gone. Would anybody have ever looked in that locker for something? Like, obviously, at some point, they would have emptied that locker.
But by that point, he could have been long, long gone. He could have gotten away with murder, probably.
Yeah.
When the bag was opened at Scotland Yard, the contents were inspected properly, and they were revealed to be female clothing, long lengths of silk, both heavily bloodstained, and the cook's knife, which Mahon had bought before going to Eastbourne. All of this was heavily stained with blood and body grease and sprinkled with disinfectant.
So he'd made an attempt to cover it.
Yes. There was also a canvas racket bag, which had Emily Kaye's initials on it.
That's a bad one to leave behind. Like, that's a serious clue right there.
It is. When Inspector Savage asked Mahon at Scotland Yard why the contents of his bag included a knife and silk and clothing heavily stained with blood, Mahon stated, "I'm very fond of dogs. I suppose I carried home some dog meat for our pet dogs in that bag."
No,
Inspector Savage wasn't buying it, obviously. He already knew from forensic testing that it was human blood. And he pointed out that they already knew the blood was human. And also that nobody wraps dog's meat in silk clothing.
Yeah, fair enough.
During the initial questioning, Mahon was incredibly evasive in response to how the blood-stained items came to be in his possession. But after several hours of questioning by Percy Savage, Mahon suddenly became silent, remarking, "I'm considering my position." He's said to have quietly considered for about 15 minutes before saying, "I suppose you know everything already. I'll tell you the truth."
Okay. So he's shat himself and he's realised that he's done for.
He knows they know it's blood. He knows that they could probably follow his trail to Officer's house.
And we know that they know that Emily's missing at this point.
Yes, 100%.
So it doesn't take a genius to add all those points together.
No. So Mahon then tells Percy Savage his false version of the events of Emily's death. That she fell when they were arguing and hit her head on a coal scuttle.
Oh, as happens all the time.
It does. Mahon also claimed, falsely, to have bought the kitchen knife after the 15th of April. So after Emily's death. When he panicked, he said, and decided to dismember and dispose of Emily's body.
Okay, so his story as such is, she's died while we're there. I've shat my pants. And I thought, nobody's going to believe me. I need to get rid of her. But I also need to get my end away, so I might as well phone Ethel.
Well, he didn't mention Ethel. But he claimed... He never told the authorities about her, but he definitely claims that he panicked after Emily's death, and that was when he went out, having decided to dismember and dispose of her body, to buy the knife and the hacksaw. Now, we know, and the authorities knew, that he'd bought the knife and the saw days before Emily's death, proving premeditation not just to murder her, but for the dismemberment and the disposal as well.
Yeah, so we know by his purchases that this was not a short-term moment, it was a plan.
Yeah, this was premeditated. As Mahon was being questioned, police were searching Officer's house. Sections of Emily's dismembered body were found within the travelling trunk, engraved with her initials, oddly enough. Inspector Savage placed the trunk in the scullery of the property before contacting Scotland Yard. Sir Bernard Spilsbury, another name that we know, the famous forensic pathologist,
We've heard of him before.
Many times. He arrived in Eastbourne on the 4th of May to assist in the recovery and in the examination of the remains. Spilsbury travelled to the bungalow to look at the body, and he found pieces literally everywhere, including some that had been partially boiled over the fire. There were organs in biscuit tins. There was body grease and human blood splashed all over the house. He would say later that this was the most gruesome crime scene he had ever encountered.
Wow.
And that is saying something.
Yeah, as a forensic pathologist at that time frame, it wouldn't have been his first rodeo seeing a dead body, and obviously, it probably wasn't his first rodeo seeing quite a I don't want to use the word brutal, but quite a horrific murder.
No, he'd probably seen a number of mutilations in his time, but this, even with that in mind, his task this time was rather unpleasant. He had to collect the hundreds upon hundreds of fragments and bits of Emily Kaye's body, already several days decomposed, and to the best of his ability, reconstruct the body to prove identity and to ascertain, if possible, the cause of death.
That's a really grim jigsaw, like, based on the fact that, did you say it was two different attempts, two different periods of dismembering between taking the head and the arms and everything off?
Yes.
In the first instance, the boiling of it is just, it actually makes me feel quite sick thinking about that. Like, obviously, a lot of the shit we talk about makes me feel quite sick, if I'm being honest. The dismembering, you can park to one side because we've talked about it a lot. The physically going back and taking the time to strip the meat from the bone just removes humanity from it entirely.
Yeah, it's hideous. It's the lack of empathy required to do that, I find almost unbelievable. Spilsbury found amongst the bits a bruised shoulder that indicated a sharp blow inflicted pre-death, so ante-mortem.
Ante-mortem, not heard that one before, but it makes perfect sense. Okay.
Yeah, the opposite of post-mortem.
Of course it is, but yes, pre-mortem.
Yeah, exactly, pre-mortem. However, despite this shoulder, once the body was assembled, Spilsbury discovered that Emily Kaye's head, obviously, as I mentioned, her uterus, her unborn child, and her entire right leg and hip were all missing.
Oh.
Since Mahon claimed that Emily had hit her head, without it, Spilsbury could not definitively establish a cause of death. Nevertheless, he found that she could not have died from hitting her head on the coal bucket as Mahon claimed, because it showed no sign of blood, hair, or damage.
So this coal scuttle itself became the proving point there. So you don't need the head to prove the head hasn't been damaged.
Yeah.
But, although the
in the way that he claimed.
Thank you. That's what I meant. Yeah.
So Patrick Mahon was formally charged for the murder of Emily Kaye on the 6th of May. His trial took place at the Lewes Assizes on the 15th of July, 1924, before Judge Mr. Justice Avery, another name we've come across before.
We have come across Justice Avery before, yeah.
And he was actually the same judge who presided over the previous Crumbles murder trial, which you'll cover, the killing of Irene Monroe 4 years before. Mahon would be defended by J.D. Castles, who was actually also the man who defended Irene Monroe's killers.
Okay.
Mahon pled not guilty to murder. Now, J.D. Castles did his best, given the wealth of hard evidence against his defendant, but he was fighting a losing battle from the start. His closing statement to the jury finished with the words, "Have you, before you, an inhuman monster, or a man who is the victim of the most extraordinary combination of circumstances?"
Is this a Lemony Snicket, or did he kill her?
No, it's not a Lemony Snicket.
It's not a Lemony Snicket.
The chief prosecutor was Sir Henry Curtis Bennett, who did an excellent job of proving premeditation with the receipts for the knife and the saw, as well as establishing the double motive of initial financial gain and the subsequent need to silence Emily after she fell pregnant. Now,
Yeah, so it's. I mean, it's. I know we said this like 20 minutes ago, but it's all about the money.
yes, it is. Sir Bernard Spilsbury's medical testimony was crucial. He testified on the third day, I think it was, of Mahon's trial. He supported prosecution's belief that Emily Kaye could not have sustained any fatal injury from hitting her head on the coal scuttle. He dismissed Mahon's claim that Emily's death had been accidental as preposterous. Spilsbury testified that the extensive bruising about one of Emily Kaye's shoulders led him to suspect that she'd been bludgeoned to death with an axe handle that was incidentally missing from the bungalow, and which, along with her skull and uterus, were never found. Spilsbury further stated that, contrary to Mahon's claim, Emily could not have thrown an axe at him prior to the two engaging in a scuffle, because no walls, doors, or door frames within Officer's house bore any evidence of having been struck with an axe.
So there's no impact damage to anything.
Exactly. Spilsbury also proved, grimly, that human bone could be nearly completely destroyed by burning and pulverizing. He did this by experimenting on sheep's heads, performing the exact same actions that Mahon was suspected of, incinerating them on a coal fire and then pulverizing the severely charged bits into tiny fragments.
It's really interesting, that, actually, because
he's a fantastic scientist, Spilsbury.
I was going to say, like, the ability to follow that level of what am I trying to say here? To follow that thread all the way through, to go, well, do you know what? I'm going to give this a go and see, because when we've talked, and I'm sure we've definitely talked about, certainly if I haven't done with you, I have done with Nadine, when they burn it, there is evidence left
Yes.
in a coal fire. But that
100%.
then, I suppose the removal and then the pulverizing of it is the next step to what's the word I'm looking for? Hiding
disposal?
the crime. The disposal, thank you, yeah. Whereas now, 100 years later, you'd probably get a DNA test off it.
Yeah. You almost certainly could now. It's very difficult to completely eradicate DNA in today's day and age.
Whereas this was a case of its time where you just go, well, there's no way they're going to find this out. But Spilsbury's gone, challenge accepted, pal, watch this.
Yeah. And he proved that it was possible. So the trial concludes on the 19th of July, 1924. The jury deliberates for 45 minutes before returning with a verdict of guilty.
You shock me.
I know. Upon hearing the verdict, Mahon loudly spoke out concerning what he saw as the bitterness and the unfairness of Justice Avery's biased handling of the case.
Oh, so this guy was a cunt through and through.
He was. Because in reality, from what I've read, the trial was conducted incredibly fairly.
And as we said a minute ago, I'm pretty sure we've heard about Justice Avery before.
We have.
We certainly, if he'd been a bad judge, I would have remembered him better. If it was something that I went, Hannah, shit, it's that guy again. It was certainly not one that jumps to mind, and he's followed due process in this case, and he's had evidence presented to him, and I presume at this point he's going to don a little hat.
He's going to don his black cap, and he's going to say, Patrick Herbert Mahon, the jury have arrived at the only proper conclusion on the evidence that was laid before them. They have arrived at that conclusion without knowing anything of your past life. There can be no question that you deliberately designed the death of this woman. For that crime, you must suffer the penalty imposed by the law. The sentence of the court upon you is that you be taken from this place to a lawful prison and then to a place of execution, and that you there be hanged by the neck until you be dead, and that your body be afterwards buried within the precincts of the prison wherein you shall have been confined before your execution. And may the Lord have mercy upon your soul.
Getting to the point, Al, where we've both read out the latter part of that statement by a judge that I reckon we could both do it drunk.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Now we're getting to the end. Mahon was hanged for the murder of Emily Belby Kaye on the 3rd of September. He went to the gallows quietly, but protested his innocence to the very end, never admitting responsibility for what he'd done.
Bastard.
He was. He's top of our list. But there is one, not a ray of hope, but there's one good thing that came out of this case. Apart from the obvious emotional damage and the grief suffered by her family and friends, the most notable lasting effect of the horrible killing of Emily Kaye was the vast improvement in police forensic procedures. Sir Bernard Spilsbury was appalled by the handling of the crime scene at Officer's House, by the lack of care in preserving the evidence and the lack of preventing contamination of the scene. As a direct result of this, Spilsbury, alongside with a Dr. Scott Gillett and Inspector Percy Savage, compiled a list of standard procedures which officers would follow on any crime scene, which was first instigated by the Metropolitan Police and later by all forces across the country. They also created the first standard forensic kit, later known as the murder bag, to be used on all future crime scenes.
Wow. That's really cool. I wonder how much of that still stands in modern policing. Just like out of like the Spilsbury kit, I wonder how much of that still
exists.
Yeah. I mean, imagine like, huge amounts of it will have been changed, but the first thing that jumped to mind when you were talking about that was we talked about cases where they used the crime scene as like a local fucking tourist attraction almost, where they allowed people to go in and out of it, and you're just absolutely smashing any evidence to bits at that point.
Yeah, I bet a lot of the bag has been upgraded.
Yeah.
I would also bet that, considering Spilsbury, I bet a lot of the procedures are still in force. I bet a lot of the procedures for not contaminating crime scenes that he instigated right back then are still used today.
Yeah, so remove the technology advances, the fact that you don't pick that up, like the simple things that we know about just by having watched enough bloody crime dramas growing up or whatever.
Any samples taken, use gloves so you don't contaminate evidence.
Not everyone can walk through this scene untethered. Like, everything has to be... I bet a lot of that's probably still Spilsbury's.
It would not surprise me.
One day we'll have to try and get a cop to come and chat to us, Ali, and just like a forensic cop or a DI or somebody that would know if a Spilsbury kit is something that they know about, or whether it's just us being very romantic about this moment.
It would also be interesting, I think, to visit a police museum if they had, a 1920s, 1930s Spilsbury kit. Well,
do you know, funnily enough, I looked at when we met up in London last week, and I'd had a look just in case you guys couldn't make it up to see what was in, and the police crime museum that's in London, it's only open. I mean, I don't think it's open all the time. I don't think it's like just a museum that you can go to, but they have some of the most horrible things. I might be wrong, but I think it might be there where the Burke and Hare skin-bound book is still on show and things like that. So I bet they've got a murder bag. I bet there's a 1928, 1930s murder bag or record of in that kind. That would be my guess to where it would be.
It'd be fascinating.
We'll have to do it one day. We'll make it.
Twisted field trip.
Twisted pub tour /field trip.
Yeah.
So he was sentenced and hanged, I presume.
Yes, he was.
Not presume. I know you've just told me.
Yeah, 3rd of September, 1924.
Never admitting his guilt.
Never did. No. Professed his innocence to the end.
Do we know what happened to his wife? Did she just...
Jessie went on. Her 2 kids grew up. She disavowed her husband after the murder, but she stuck by him right up until he was convicted.
That's fucking mad, isn't it? I mean, it's not the only case we've heard of partners sticking with them, whether male or female. I mean, it tends to be male perpetrators and women sticking with them, because the women we talk about tend to be black widows and poisoners, and they have killed their partners. But yeah, Jessie should have done one quicker than that, I feel.
I agree.
Yeah.
But I mean, 1911, 1920, could you divorce?
I don't think so. I'm not going to put my name on the line here, Alistair, but I don't think you, or if you could, it would have been
It would have to be consensual.
No, it wouldn't have. Not even consensual. She couldn't have brought it up. It would have been a male.
Yeah, I don't think she could have brought it up. That's what I mean.
Yeah. Fuck.
Which is terrible.
I bet she felt fucking lucky it wasn't her.
Yes.
Because it could have quite easily been her instead of Emily. Not that I'm saying that makes it any okay, but...
No, nothing makes it okay, but I do think you're right. I think if Mahon is the kind of financially motivated, remorseless person that if he'd found somebody rich enough, replacing his wife would not have caused him any moral problems whatsoever.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, she was easy to remove, but actually he, based on what you've told me this evening, he thought he was going to get away with it and just go back to his wife and carry on.
Yeah, he did.
I'd probably do it again.
I think if he'd got away with it, he would have. If he'd got away with it, he might have been a serial killer.
Well done to our Beard...
Detective Inspector Beard, Detective Inspector Percy Savage, and Sir Bernard Spilsbury.
Beard, Savage, and Spilsbury is a podcast I would listen to.
Yeah, so would I.
100%. Not thank you for that, Ali, because it's grim.
It's grim. I took the grimmer of the 2 Crumbles murders.
Yes, you have, and I'm going to not rewrite, but I will take the one that you've written, and I thank you for writing that. You didn't have to do that, and I'll write it I'll not rewrite it, but I'll structure it in a way there where you can still ask me questions even though it's your script.
Yeah,
because I think that this may be our fall down in all of this. People will have already listened to episode 1 by the time this one comes out. If episode 1 was shit, we will not write each other's scripts again. Let's go with that.
I think you'll be grand. If I was you, I would put it in Bob words.
100. Well, I've read it. I told you this when we met up in London. I actually listened to it. I used the Microsoft Word reading tool when it reads it to you, and I went, "Oh, that's cool." It's about 40 odd minutes, but it's not how I would write it. But I will go back and I will look it up and I will rewrite it for you. So,
thank you. Before
we sign off this evening, how Southern England are you going to stay with your podcasts for the next wee while?
I'm really enjoying Southern England and the more local cases.
Well, we talked about this in the video.
About this recently with Mike from Murder Mile,
yeah,
which was a great thing for me because he's mildly my inspiration for this. I've been looking more and more locally for the cases and less nationally and less generally. There's so much history locally if you just care to look for it. It's fabulous.
The one thing I would say is it's made your podcast less French, which was a problem for a while.
That's true, yeah. These
Um,
cases are at least British.
No, that they are. They are ticking all the boxes, and that's why I'm not stopping you. You crack on because that is Twisted and Britain. So you're hitting literally all the points that we need right now.
Boom.
Thank you for that, Alistair. Tonight that was. Do you know what? It was interesting because I found a love for wonderful policing recently, and I think that was a good one for that.
It was. There was some excellent policing and some fantastic improvements in policing and in forensic procedure came about because of this case.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Like I like the fact that. Oh, well, I mean, you know me. I like the first fingerprint, the first use of dogs, the first anything that changes the police force to make it better in society is something that I love because you're like, that's a moment. That's a moment that changed something. It's not just a moment that sadly somebody loses their life, but like something's happened positively off the back of a horrible thing. And if we can take any solace from anything, if positive comes out of negative, then society's winning, I suppose. I'm not taking away from Emily's murder in any way, and I don't.
No,
mean
not
that
in any
at all.
way, shape, or form. But it's rare that you can see a genuine positive change in policing, and this is a definite positive change in policing. Well done, police.
Are you clicking something?
Maybe.
Stop it. What a fucking star hair clip.
It's a star hair clip, Bob.
And on that note, I'm going to leave you this evening, as I always do, with a thank you, love you, bye.
Sorry, love you, bye.
In fact, you know what? You should always finish with a sorry, love you, bye. There we go.
I will from now on.
Thank you very much, Alistair. We'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you, bye. I can hear myself. Thank you, bye.